Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Zackheim, you participated in the current development of the National Defense Strategy and the previous National Defense Strategy. Is that correct?
I had an opportunity to be on the Defense Strategy Commission, which reviewed the former one, and will review the present one.
In your testimony, you make a case for real growth in the defense budget. That's real purchasing power over and above what's being taken out by inflation. And you talk about measuring our defense contribution in terms of a percentage of the GDP. Why is that a good way to measure it? And you talked toward the end of your testimony, your written testimony, about how we can do that and still achieve some real savings and efficiencies.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. GDP, I think, is just a good way to look historically of what our country, our nation, has devoted to national defense. As you know, we're below 3.5% GDP and declining in the out years. Historically, we have been over 10%. During the Reagan build-up, we were between 5 and 6%. And I think the combination in terms of where our military is today, and that is a force that hasn't actually been modernized since the Reagan build-up, for a variety of reasons, either peace dividends or what we've spent on armed conflict, plus inflationary challenges, plus the national security environment, which my colleagues have outlined in their testimony, requires doing this. And I think there are three fundamental pieces here that are required. I think of it as winning today, which is taking our conventional force and upgrading it. I think it's leveraging the technologies that will transform our militaries, that China's doing as well. That requires a whole new suite of investments led by autonomy in every domain of warfare. And the third, as you've pointed out and led on us, Senator Wicker, industrial capacity. The reality that we've seen from Ukraine will play out. We're seeing it right now in terms of the backlog in supporting Taiwan. And what we need for our own national defense, we just don't have the industrial capacity to keep up. You add all three of them, Chairman, Ranking Member, I wouldn't disagree with you, but I'm not sure 5% real growth is enough to get there. And what I'm trying to get to is what the National Defense Strategy actually calls for. This is what the defense strategy says it seeks to do in terms of leading in 3 regions of the world, being able to compete today and to prevail in one conflict while holding another adversary, preventing a second conflict. To do all that requires a force that we simply don't have today and capabilities we don't have enough of today.
Well, that's a very important statement you just made. So it really is, in terms of what we need, we need to quantify exactly what we need to buy in the near and foreseeable future. And that might be more than 5%.
I believe so, Chair, as Ranking Member Wicker and Chairman Reed. I think this committee, what you've done in terms of adding to the defense request has gone a long way. And I know it's hard to do, but I don't believe it's sufficient.
Dr. Hill, what about that?
Well, I obviously planning ahead and trying to, foresee where we might end up is pretty difficult, given, as Mr. Zackheim is talking about, the capacity issues that have been revealed by the war in Ukraine. I mean, right now, unfortunately, it's very hard to say how long this is going to continue. But I think, one thing that we do have to factor in here is, sadly listening to Dr. Lin, it seems more and more likely that China and Russia will find their interests converging, as they already have up until this date, that we might be actually dealing with problems on 2 fronts for a long time to come. I think, something to add to what Dr. Lin said is China has no interest in Russia losing in this war, and might in fact have a vested interest in this war going on in Ukraine as long as possible, because of course it does take up a large amount of equipment and armaments, particularly ammunition, as we now know, and then the increasing demands from Ukraine, which are tied very much to the battlefield for other equipment. We've seen our other allies from Europe, not just NATO countries, but others, stepping up to assist Ukraine here too.
Dr.
So there's
Hill.
a question about their production capacity, and I think that we should factor in as well what the European militaries are going to require too, because they're also dependent on our production.
Do you agree that the Russian offensive seems to have stalled, and if there were a successful counteroffensive by Ukraine in the next 2 to 3 months, China would pay attention to that and perhaps alter their ambitions?
It's possible. I think, again, we know that it's extraordinarily difficult now for the Ukrainians to dislodge the Russians from certain of the positions. They've dug in very heavily in Zaporizhia and Kherson. We're seeing this World War I-like fighting on the front line in the Donbass region. I think all of us, in looking at this, not just military experts, but others, see that this is going to be quite a grind. And I think, China obviously is watching this very closely. The situation in Taiwan is quite difficult. I mean, this is a maritime challenge, not one of land warfare. And actually, one thing to bear in mind is the Russian Navy has not really been affected by this. And, we're seeing these joint naval exercises with South Africa. That's why I mentioned the importance of getting to middle powers and other, friends in the global south with China and Russia that might show, different kinds of offensives or actions that Russia could take to distract us from what's happening in Ukraine. As I said, this is an extraordinarily difficult situation that we're in, but I think we would make a mistake if we think of China and what Russia is doing as two separate things. I think right now they're melded together. We have to have a 360-degree perspective around this, including what our other allies and partners can bring to the table.
Thank you, and thank you, Mr. Chairman.